So, tell me, did you know that Steve Jobs died of ligma?
Who's Steve Jobs?
Ligma balls. Hello and welcome everybody to yet another episode of the Power System series, where we look at various power systems across anime and manga and discuss how they work, as well as what they do well and not so well. Today we'll be looking at probably one of the most requested power systems in a while, which might have to do with it being really fucking confusing. What the fuck is this math? Today, we're talking about Jujutsu Kaisen, Shonen Jump's new hotness, and the embodiment of rawness and swag, as some might say. Speaking of swag, anime merch is one of those things that's either really embarrassing or really cool. There really is no in between. If you want to make sure to stay on the right side of this dichotomy, boy are you in luck, because this is the part where I tell you about our first ever sponsor, the Anime Collective. The Anime Collective is an online anime merch store which offers a variety of cool and sleek designs featuring all your favorite characters and series, including a brand new Jujutsu Kaisen line. From Naruto to JoJo, if you even marginally care for anime, and trust me, I fucking do, you'll probably find something you like. And with the goods being produced in-house in the USA, sizes up to 2XL and global shipping, quality and availability are guaranteed, as hundreds of satisfied customers will gladly tell you in their reviews. So get yours today using my code in the description or just the link in the description to get 10% off your purchase, so you can proudly rock your favorite magic warrior, high schooler, firefighter. These designs are awesome and I highly hope you check them out. Alright, moving swiftly along. Here are some good news. Humans are bound to negativity. That is a fact we must all accept. Be it in the empiric findings of our negativity bias or the anecdotal experiences of our own daily lives, humanity is inherently defined by its ability to produce, maintain, and seek negative emotions and attitudes. While that is a horrifyingly sad reality, it is the origin of a lot of great fiction, as many writers have asked and pondered that exact negativity and what it means to us. One such writer is Gege Akutami, who, when constructing the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, asked themselves, what if we took humanity's negativity and weaponized it? Cursed energy is the manifestation of the negative emotions and thoughts that leak out of human beings. Those leaked emotions pool and fester until they form a sort of metaphysical, raw, and tremendously destructive energy. That cursed energy can then take on a multitude of forms. In most cases, the cursed energy remains unchecked, pooling and accumulating until it reaches a critical point at which it curses the place it inhabits, manifesting as unexplained phenomena or even as a cursed spirit, humanoid, grotesque beings that torment and kill humans. These cursed spirits vary in strength and intelligence, usually somewhat proportional to the level of negative emotions associated with the concept or specific feeling they represent. The cursed spirit of humanity's fear of the ocean is naturally a hell of a lot more powerful than one that represents the anxiety of coming late to class. However, cursed energy can also be harnessed. Some rare individuals can control the flow of the cursed energy within them, stopping it from leaking out and instead focusing it into a usable form. These are called Jujutsu sorcerers. Just like how raw electricity is useless by itself, but useful when run through an appliance, so too is raw cursed energy almost impossible to wield by itself, but it can be funneled into Jujutsu, a cursed technique that instrumentalizes the energy to perform various tasks. For example, exorcising cursed spirits, which can coincidentally only be harmed through this very method. Cursed techniques come in various different types and applications, but generally they cannot be learned. Aside from some limited abilities that all sorcerers can learn and develop, about 80% of a sorcerer's ability is innate. Specifically, a sorcerer's cursed technique is determined at birth and is often also passed down through bloodlines. If someone has a cursed technique, however, they are then also subject to a strict degree of conditionality and power gaps. You might be born with the ability to literally bring the abstract concept of infinity into existence, or you might be given the power to make lingerie out of your own blood. The power of these techniques varies greatly, but they all can be enhanced through a very simple idea: limitations. Cursed energy, as a negative energy, reacts to hardship and difficulty, swelling alongside them. By imposing restrictions, conditions, or additional difficulties, a sorcerer can power up the flow of cursed energy and therefore their technique. This is often called a binding vow. For example, Nanami restricts himself to not using his full power during work hours, which limits him for several hours of the day. But as soon as his job requires him to go overtime, his technique receives a massive boost beyond his regular output. Or as a more general example, many sorcerers can strengthen their technique by simply telling their opponent how it works. The added danger of fighting a knowledgeable foe is rewarded with a power boost. In general, pacts and conditional agreements play a large role in how cursed energies work, with some restrictions, called heavenly restrictions, even being placed on children at birth for unknown reasons. This includes giving someone a useless body in exchange for boundless cursed energy, or giving someone no cursed energy in exchange for a superhuman body with superhuman physical strength. As aforementioned, most techniques are innate, and some are even tied to a specific bloodline. These inherited techniques tend to be immensely powerful, as not only have they been selected for and refined by multiple generations, but they also have much more information about them available within those families, meaning that training them is more streamlined as your clan guides you to mastering the technique your ancestors nurtured. Aside from that, there are some abilities that any sorcerer can learn, given enough time and talent. These tend to be relatively minor, but immensely useful if used in the right situations. For example, Simple Domain creates a stationary, small area within which all other techniques are neutralized. This sounds really powerful, but it is limited by the fact that if the user is forced to remove both of their feet from the position in which they casted it, it'll be dispelled. So, good utility, but huge weak spot. Meanwhile, Reverse Technique takes the inherently destructive power of cursed energy and reverses it, turning it into a healing energy. This again sounds incredibly useful, but it is very difficult to learn for humans. In fact, there's only a handful of sorcerers who are capable of doing it consistently. And then there are curtains, which are cursed walls that a sorcerer can erect in order to block out someone or a group of people. Lastly, if a sorcerer, without any specific curse technique, is capable of manipulating cursed energy to a high degree, the highest degree possible, the cursed energy will imbue their own physical attacks automatically, flashing black when that happens. This is called the Black Flash, and while it is immensely powerful, it is actually not possible, as of right now, to use that technique willingly. It happens automatically when a sorcerer enters what one would call the zone, when they are perfectly immersed in being a sorcerer and when they perfectly feel the flow of cursed energy. It is hard to get into that zone, and it is even harder to do it repeatedly. However, should it happen, the Black Flash is one of the strongest abilities any Jujutsu sorcerer can pull off. However, while the Black Flash is one of the strongest abilities, or rather phenomena, that can happen due to cursed energy, the strongest class of abilities, bar none, is ironically a type that is learnable by everyone and doesn't have to be inherited, although they are incredibly difficult to learn and master. This type of ability is called Domain Expansion. Considered the peak of Jutsu Mastery, Domain Expansion works by creating a bubble in space, a so-called domain. That domain is then infused with the user's curse technique. This makes it so that not only is that technique heavily boosted in power, but it can also never miss any target that's inside the domain, as the target is pretty much inside of the technique itself. This is already an immensely powerful move, but it's turned into a win button once you consider that there are only 3 ways to be hit with a domain expansion and come out alive. 1, since you can't dodge, you could try countering any techniques thrown at you with your own technique, but you'll probably run out of juice before the boosted user of the domain does. 2, you could try to escape from the bubble, but since the entire point of a domain is to trap people, that is generally considered impossible. And 3, you could expand your own domain. When 2 domains try to inhabit the same space, the stronger, more polished one will destroy the weaker one and reign supreme. This can be a way to win the battle after the enemy has cast a domain, but it takes a lot of mastery of something that already requires mastery just to pull off poorly, and isn't something just anyone can do. Generally, the casting of domain expansion heralds the end of a battle. Aito, that covers the basics. There are more specific things we could get into, like cursed objects or cursed corpses, but most of those basically boil down to thing is infused with cursed energy and has properties of a cursed technique. So let's not get into that. This power system is already incredibly dense as it is, and I'm sure you can tell. Let's instead begin talking about the positives, of which there are many. For starters, I really love how raw and natural cursed energy is as a power system. If you watched my old video on quirks, you might remember that I think power systems become more interesting the less obvious they are about being a power system. What I mean is that I will often like a power system more if it manages to feel more like an organic part of the fictional world, rather than just a system of abilities that was added because it's shonen. Arguably, you could say, and you should say, that all battle shonen try to do this. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm gonna write a power system that feels artificial. But few are super successful at that. Jujutsu Kaisen is one of those few, luckily. Cursed energy isn't even really a power system, and more just like a natural phenomenon that was seemingly never meant to be weaponized. A great example is the Black Flash, which isn't something you can do willingly, it's just a property of cursed energy that occasionally comes in and helps you, and I really like that. This impression is evoked through how volatile and complicated cursed energy in general is to control, with it being an almost exclusively destructive force that only those with innate talent can truly make their own. I really like that, I cannot overstate that, because it turns it into another extension of the world building, an extension that adds to the coherence of Jujutsu Kaisen's setting. Another big plus of this system is its immense creativity. Because it isn't based on something relatively played out like, say, the elements, it is free to have its characters possess literally any ability imaginable. And it regularly uses this freedom to create some incredibly creative and fun abilities that all manage to make battles interesting and engaging. Take for example Todo's curse technique, Boogie Woogie. The ability to swap two objects in space isn't exactly mind-blowing, but combined with the kinetic energy of Jujutsu Kaisen's action, as well as Akutami's great choreography, which is also actually shown very well in the anime, it becomes an immensely cool ability to witness. In general, I just love the combat interactions that cursed energy brings with it. The hectic panic of someone trying to desperately prevent an enemy like Gojo from activating his domain never gets old for me. I know this is somewhat of a hot take because I've seen people complain about them a bit, but I love domain expansion's impact on the system, where there are these instant win buttons that need to be outmaneuvered and avoided at all costs. It makes everything automatically very high stakes, and I really like that. It also serves to not draw battles out. A battle can only be so long until someone casts a domain, which is good. I don't really like really drawn out battles. Or, for another example, I absolutely love the concept of binding vows. They remind me of the best parts of Nen. My absolute favorite example of such a vow has to be Sukuna's domain expansion, which, unlike most other expansions, does not actually create a barrier, instead allowing anyone to escape freely. However, that seemingly massive weakness is more than compensated for by the immense boost in power his ability receives due to it, allowing him to instantly obliterate anything in a 200-meter radius. It's back and forths like these that make reading Jujutsu Kaisen fights incredibly entertaining from top to bottom. Additionally, I adore how cursed energy is intertwined with characterization. Sure, there's the way the unique abilities inform their characters, which is kinda similar to Stan's and Nen. But while that's cool, that's not the main thing that gets me. What gets me is how cursed energy is inherently incapable of being emotionally neutral. Think about it. This magic juice is made from hate, anxiety, fear, sorrow. This means that any scene where anyone uses cursed energy has the potential for interesting character implications, because the very act of how they use cursed energy gives us a clue into their personality and emotion. And the way the nature of cursed energy and its existence in the first place are often used for discussions and regarding the validity of the human existence is some real good shit. This, of course, also reinforces the story's main themes around death and life, which is just textbook greatness. I'm not saying that anytime Yuji activates his cursed energy, we get a huge monologue on death and life. That would be inefficient and kind of boring. But what I'm saying is that any scene in which cursed energy is used has the potential to be telling about what the story thinks of life and death and what it means for humanity. And I think that having that potential be a constant undercurrent of your power system is just so fucking cool. It makes me engaged in every single scene, because every time someone uses cursed energy, they might be saying something about themselves. And more often than not, that is the case. Now, we have to, of course, also discuss the negatives, just to be fair. But luckily, there are only really a few, and they're not really that bad. For one, the system is pretty dense, as I'm sure you've noticed. It isn't complicated, really, it's just expansive enough to the point where you definitely need someone to explain it to you in a good way. And Akutami does an job at that. It's not that stuff isn't explained, but rather the wrong things are explained first. The story tends to focus on specific techniques and phenomena before really discussing the basics, and that can be really disorienting on a first read or watch, especially considering how complex the system actually ends up being and how many layers it has. Again, it's not super difficult, just difficult enough where a bad explanation can really hamper your enjoyment. To be fair, I think this very much ties into the idea of cursed energy being a natural occurrence rather than a system. It flows unpredictably and is somewhat ephemeral, and part of that is due to how it is presented. So really, I can't say that I would know how to, or even if to fix this, but it definitely is something that occasionally had me doing a double take more often than I would ideally want to. Now, if you watched my Shonen Jump profile on Jujutsu Kaisen, which you totally should, you might remember that I mentioned that the English manga suffered from inconsistent translations, where terms regarding the power system kept changing translations. Well, good news, this has been fixed in the physical volume releases. No more Juryoko or Jurye bullshit. However, bad news, the Shonen Jump app, which is the main way most people will read the series, still uses the weekly scans and has, as of writing this video, not been updated with the volume scans. This might happen soon, and to be honest, this issue doesn't even exist if you just watch the anime, where the terms are consistent anyway, but it is something worth mentioning. And that's it. Cursed Energy is a phenomenal power system, which incorporates characterization and thematization into an insanely fun set of abilities, which never fail to make me engaged and interested in the battles they appear in. Its density can be daunting, but once you grasp the basic gist of it, it's insanely rewarding to strategize along the cast in the wonderful battles the series weaves. We are nowhere near the conclusion of Jujutsu Kaisen, and I'm sure this system is going to become even more interesting and even more dense, and I personally cannot wait for that. But that's it from my part. Thank you so much for watching, I love you all, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye. Can you believe this guy has the nerve to outsource the end credits to us?
I know, right? We aren't even real. Soon this stuck-up egomaniac's gonna be the death of us.
Ugh, whatever. He does pay us at least.
Wait, you're getting paid?
We would like to thank all of the wonderful patrons and channel members that keep the channel running, with a special thank you to Erina, Christian Finkbeiner, Kendra Williams, Sini, Zanji1, Mr. Meander, and of course, Joe.
Joe? Who's Joe?
Joe Mama.
What the fuck?